On to the next agenda item. Commissioner Haddow, Chair's authority to limit discussions / determine commission scope on issues of public concern during commission listening sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is a more precise problem that I had with the chairman's description of what she believed to be the scope of the issues of public concern during listening sessions, and that the discussion about critical race theory and culturally responsible teaching was outside of that scope. It is a pronouncement that she made publicly. Now, I know that there is a disagreement about this issue, but it was Chairman Rock who, in the August meeting, placed this as an agenda item at the start to discuss critical race theory and offer her opinion about it. I was not present because I was at a family funeral in August when the meeting took place. So in the September meeting, I raised the issue, and we had a better than 30-minute discussion about critical race theory and culturally responsible training that was done for teachers. At the sort of the end of that discussion, there were two commissioners that expressed the view, which they rightfully are entitled to do so, that they didn't think that this was in the scope of the commission. I think it was Commissioner Porter and School Board Member Williams who said that. But there was no formal action taken. At that point, it would have been appropriate if someone wanted to say, well, I move that we exclude this discussion. There was no such action taken by the commission. And I even said, I'm going to continue to discuss this. So the real issue comes down to this dispute that we have among some of us about whether critical race theory is being taught in Prince William County schools. And I think, just as a reflection on what we heard at our town hall meeting, there is no question that in the public school system in Prince William County, there is no textbook that is distributed to the students called critical race theory. There is no teacher's syllabus on the critical race theory curriculum that one could point to. And there is no course listing for students called Critical Race Theory 101 or 102 or so on. These words, those words, critical race theory, is not being taught in Prince William County schools, but it is a deliberately misleading phrase, in my opinion, that relies upon verbal gymnastics to deceive the public about the reality of what teachers are required as a condition of their teaching license or for renewing that license to be trained on correcting embedded and unconscious racism in our classrooms using the basic tenets of critical race theory. You don't have to believe me on this issue, by the way. You can go and look at the Virginia Department of Education Equity website, where it clearly outlines the objectives of culturally responsible teaching. It says to establish policies and procedures to advance anti-racist school culture and climate, uses cultural differences as assets necessary to inform the development of instructional resources, mediates power imbalances based on race, culture, ethnicity, and class, utilize students' culture as a vehicle for learning. Diverse groups from all rings of culture are represented, validated, and affirmed. Establishes a three-pronged approach. All of this from the Virginia Department of Education Equity site. Institutional, recognizes the need for reform of school policies and procedures based on cultural factors. Personal, requires teachers to become culturally responsive. Responsive, and even forces them into passing for their relicensure a test on that, an assessment. Instructional, provides educational materials that are culturally affirming and aid in delivering culturally responsive instructions. The basic tenets of anti-racist education are: racism exists today in both traditional and modern forms. All members of society have been socialized to participate in racist systems. Teachers are instructed to develop in their lessons plans around the following resources. And listen to who those resources are that are on that website. Zaretta Hammond, who's with the New America Foundation. She says critical race, in her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, argues that white teachers and students must be made to feel discomfort, rest in that discomfort, confront and eventually become critical of their supposed privilege. Just having social justice stance or wanting to close the achievement gap doesn't undo our unconscious programming around the issues of race and privilege, unquote. Ibram X. Kendi, in his book, Teaching Tolerance, again on the state website, any disparity in disciplinary actions or enrollments is also ipso facto evidence of implicit racial bias. Capitalism and racism are co-joined twins that must be fought together. Benita Love from the Education Trust on the website, part of this curriculum training, to even begin to attack our destructive and punitive educational system, pedagogies that promote social justice must have teeth. American schools are spaces of whiteness, white rage, and white supremacy, all of which function to terrorize students of color. Civic education that teaches children to pay their taxes, vote, volunteer, and have good character is rejected by love as a code to comply. History tells us, she says, that dark folks' humanity is dependent on how much they disobey and fight for justice. That's a part of what the State Board of Education is telling teachers to develop their curriculum around. Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billing, quote, "But what was necessary to help African Americans to catch up with their white counterparts? Beyond equal treatment was the need to redress past inequities. Thus, there was a move towards affirmative action, the creation of African Americans and other marginalized groups as protected classes to ensure that they are not systematically screened out of opportunities in employment, college admission, and housing. If we look at the way that public education is currently configured, it is possible to see the ways that critical race theory can be a powerful explanatory tool for the sustained inequity that people of color experience. I will use areas of curriculum, instruction, assessment, school funding, and desegregation as exemplars of the relationship that can exist between CRT and education." That's what our teachers are being asked to develop their curriculum and to be assessed on in terms of their cultural competency. This goes on. Marcus Bassey, it's equally as horrendous. At the bottom line, and I'll hand this out, and I'd ask everyone, if I get some help from the staff, to hand it out. I would ask you to look at sort of the crowning blow about the question of whether we teach this in Prince William County. And I'd ask you to specific, and I've just outlined, they're right here, thank you. It just outlines the points I've just made, but on Exhibit 1, this is a spreadsheet that was used in a webinar that was done by the Virginia Department of Education Equity Group, and it is done by Ms. Borgos when she was the Prince William County representative for that, and I think her title was that Supervisor of Global Learning and Culturally Responsive Instruction. She gave this webinar, and you simply have to read on this spreadsheet exactly what the theories that are being told to the teachers that they should base their curriculum decisions around, and then ask yourself when you're done, is this critical race theory? Now, by the way, you don't have to look too much further.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
If you look at
A point of order. Sorry, just 1 second. There's a point of order.
We supposed to be talking about the chair's authority to limit discussions
well, I am.
and determine commission, but we're talking a lot about the critical race theory.
Because,
But it says chair's authority to limit discussion, determine commission scope on issues of public concern during the commission's listening sessions. But now we're getting a whole outline on critical race theory. I would like to go back to Mr. Haddow's presentation on chair of authority to limit discussions.
I'm ready to do that, to wrap this up, to make it relevant. Okay?
Thank you. We
So the
appreciate you
last
wrapping
thing
up to make it relevant.
you need to
Thank
look at,
you.
all of this information on Ms. Borgos' spreadsheet, you simply have to look at the footnote where it says, it talks about the citation, and it's critical race theory today. This information is informed by critical race theory. So the chairman of this commission said that in the press that it was not appropriate for the 3 commissioners that held a town hall to talk about critical race theory because it was not a part of the scope of the commission's mandate. Yet she brought it up in August, in the August meeting, just 2 months ago. I brought it up in response because I wasn't there, as I mentioned earlier, and addressed the issue and explained why there was a concern. Because at the time I was doing my research and I didn't see the difference between critical race theory and culturally responsible training. And we spent 30 plus minutes. There was no action taken by this commission. There could have been to stop that and say, we're not going to talk about that at all. I said at the conclusion of my remarks, and you can go back and watch it, I said, I'm going to continue to talk about this. We then brought it up in the town hall meeting because there was a pent-up demand to do so. And after that, the chairman said it was inappropriate for them to do it because it's not within the scope of the authority. On what action did the chairman make that conclusion public? There was no action by the commission. She brought it up initially. I responded, said I was going to continue to talk about it, and then she goes public and says that we are outside of the scope of what the commission's mandate was. That is simply not true. And I hope that the chairman will correct the record, because what I've shown you today is that while we may not be teaching critical race theory in terms of curriculum or syllabuses or textbooks, we are teaching critical race theory, as Mr. Parker said earlier. There are some gaps, there overlay on top of it, absolutely are. And you read what we're asking these teachers to be assessed on in their cultural competencies. We're teaching critical race theory in our schools, and it's a sham for anyone to suggest that we're not. And I think at that point, we can have a serious discussion then about
School Board Member Williams.
Race theory in the future. I'm sorry, did you think I was done?
She said point of order.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
why.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to echo our parliamentarians, because I thought the focus was to the chair's authority on determining the scope of issues related to public concern, but I'm not hearing that. I'm just hearing about critical race theory and whether or not it's being taught in the school division, which we.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
What, a point of order.
Point of order is registered.
It's not supposed to be about disagreeing with.
So that's why I said thank you for her point of order, which, thank you for bringing up your point of order. Commissioner Haddow, were you finished wrapping it up, or did you have more to tap? Thank you. Thank you. That solves the point of order right there as well.